Hi, curious friends. Welcome to Building Your Best Brain podcast. I'm excited for this topic today. It's going to be my thoughts on thoughts, and particularly when it comes to overthinking or when you feel like your thoughts are getting out of control. And I'm happy to talk about this today because today is a particularly special day. My paper this morning got accepted for publication. And I'll share this a little more at the end of the episode. This is work related to my PhD, and it was a dumpster fire to get here. And so some of the things that I experienced in terms of like constant thought ruminations and thought spirals related to this paper happened, and the tool or the kind of mechanism which allowed me to solve these thoughts or not think them all the time, I have no doubt resulted in this paper actually getting published. So I am excited to share this with you. And if you're thinking, okay, well, what's the deal with thoughts? What are you going to tell us about thoughts on thoughts on thoughts? So you may know this already, but you may not. Our thoughts can be conscious, so we can be aware of the thoughts that we're having on a day to day, or they can be unconscious. They can be thoughts that we're having, but we don't actually register with the front of our brain that we're currently having them. But their activity in our brain is the same, right? So a thought is really just a circuit, right? A collection of cells that fire together when the thought occurs. And this is something that you could be thinking of just today, like it's a new thought. You have this new thought that pops in your head, a new idea, a new link, or it's something that you could have maybe been thinking for a long time, something that you've thought about in childhood, whether it's a belief about yourself, a belief about the world. And when we think thoughts over and over again, and I say this, I think every single episode, cells that fire together, wired together, that circuit gets stronger so that the stimulation you need for that entire circuit to fire, that circuit being that thought being produced or thunk, your thought has been thunk, doesn't need as much stimulation to fire, which means that you don't need as much input to have that thought. And likely the thoughts that are subconscious, so the ones that kind of fly under the radar and that we're not aware of, are thoughts that we've had for a long time. Because we've had a lot of stimulation and that circuit is really strong, we don't need a lot happening for that circuit to fire, to the point that we might not even be aware that it's firing. And so what I find, my journey in particular, but also a lot of other people, you get to this point where you're reacting a certain way to certain things, whether it's you're reacting to getting feedback at work, or we gotta love relationships for this. We're acting out in relationships when our partner says something or does something. We kind of have this reaction that seems really big and really sudden and kind of takes us by surprise. We'll dive into this more, but it's not so much the actual thoughts that are concerning or the actual thoughts that we need to tease apart and figure out, but it's the emotions underneath those thoughts, because emotions, they kind of get bin to the category of, I don't even know. I feel like emotions don't have their own category in biology sometimes, but they kind of get pushed aside as like energetic or spiritual, and then don't get taken so seriously. But every single emotion we have a biological response. Our brain responds a certain way, our body responds a certain way. And feeling those emotions over and over again will shift things in your brain and body so that it's operating differently. Now, so some of us, right, we kind of notice that we're having these big reactions. We're basically getting triggered, is another way of putting it. Maybe feeling sad, like extreme sadness in situations, or extreme anger or irritation. And then we kind of think, well, that's kind of odd, right? Like, getting some feedback at work shouldn't make me want to crawl in a hole and cry till the end of eternity. But it does. And that's kind of when we get to those places where we have those big reactions, And we don't want to react that way anymore. We want to respond, right? We want to respond. We want to have a bit more control in how we interact with the world. Often, a lot of us will maybe go to therapy, we'll read a book, we'll journal, we'll talk with a wise sage person or a really loving friend and unpack it and begin to figure out, well, what are the underlying thoughts that kind of, because when you react, it happens so fast, right? But what are those underlying thoughts that triggered that reaction? How did this stimulus, right? I'm sounding very scientific, but honestly, we're all scientists of our own life. Every day is an experiment. What is the stimulus that caused this emotional reaction? And what was the thought that like flew under my radar that I was thinking when that happened? And this is where you start, right? You can't get to neutralizing anything if you don't even know what you're neutralizing. And so once you start doing this, and I feel like a lot of you guys are in this camp, and this is a good thing because it means that, you know, you're making progress, but it's honestly like not a fun camp to be in. It's not your typical like let's hop in a canoe, giggle till sunset, roast marshmallows by a fire camp. But you then become aware of these subconscious thoughts that have like flown under the radar. They're no longer under the radar. They are at the front of your brain, but they're still firing at the same frequency. So you're super aware of your unpleasant thoughts. And you're aware when you kind of get into a thought spiral, which is when you have one thought that triggers an emotion, and then that emotion triggers a bunch of other thoughts. Usually they're not the most pleasant because let's be real, you wouldn't be here listening to this if the thoughts you were thinking were pleasant. You would just be having those pleasant thoughts, those pleasant emotions, and not be concerned. You get into this spiral where one thought will lead to another, to another, to another, so that that emotion gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and then it just all feels out of control. And it's almost like a positive feedback loop, and not positive in the sense that it's good, but in the sense that you're creating more of it, right? So once you kind of get awareness of one thought, you begin to become aware of all your other thoughts kind of that same genre or theme. You become aware of those emotions, and that awareness is great because again, we can't fix anything that we're not aware of. But then you feel stuck in this awareness and in all these thoughts and in all these feelings. And you know that you want things to be different, you want things to change, but you know you're doing things and it's not really helping, and you're kind of stuck in this like awareness hell. This like, I like to call it kind of the stress spiral or the thought spiral, because you're super aware of what's happening, yet you're at the bottom of the spiral and you're like, I knew I was going to get here. I saw everything on the way down, but how can I stop like hitting my head up against the wall or basically falling on my butt at the end of these spirals? And so I've definitely been there, and I have my own version of this today, right? Because it's one of those things that I've dealt with it to a certain level where it's definitely not my new it's not my normal anymore. But there's certainly a point like after my master's when I was completely burnt out, which there's other episodes that go into the nitty gritty of that a bit more. I was not aware of all the subconscious thoughts, right? That led me to overworking, that led me to extending myself, that led me to think that a paper in my master's was more important than anything else in the world. And then once I gained that awareness through therapy, through yoga, through meditation, through journaling, through spiritual practices, all that, I was just super aware of how shitty I was being to myself and not actually feeling any better. I wasn't, you know what, actually I was still actively burning myself out, and I could see myself doing it, and I could see the thoughts associated with it, and I could see that it was all happening and unfolding, and I could see the pattern, which is perfect. It's perfect. But, you know, at a certain point, we're like, okay, I see it. I know the recipe on how to burn myself out consistently. What is the recipe to live a happy, fulfilling life where I feel successful and smart, because that was a big part of why I pushed myself so hard, because I wanted to feel successful. I wanted to feel smart. I wanted that validation that what I was doing was good, that I was doing a good job, that I was making an impact. How can I do that from a place where I don't feel like shit the whole time and I'm not constantly putting my health at risk and scaring my loved ones and unable to maintain close relationships because I'm just so consumed with myself, basically, in the negative sense. I think sometimes people mistaken being egotistical as thinking really highly of yourself, but you can be egotistical and think very low of yourself, but you're just so consumed with thoughts of yourself. And again, it's that positive feedback loop, right? Once you gain that awareness, you almost kind of push in one direction, and it is a good sign. And so, with this good sign, there's a lot of things you can do with it, but something that's really moved the needle for me and that I've used in really extreme situations and I've seen work is to neutralize your thoughts. And let me unpack a bit what I mean by that. And we'll do this with an example. Let's say a thought that I'm thinking all the time, which I think a lot of us may be thinking with the state of our world right now, is I don't have enough money, right? Like if I had, and whatever that amount is, right? If I had $1 million, if I had $100,000, if I had $10,000, everything would be better. I, you know, you just keep thinking that you need this money, you need this money, you would feel safer, you'd feel more secure, you'd feel more free. Everything would be better if you had this money. Now, what that does is one, you're placing conditions on yourself. And when you place conditions on yourself, your brain won't allow you to feel whatever it is you want to feel: safe, secure, freedom, able to have fun, without that thing. So it's actively looking for ways that you don't feel like that right now, right? Which again, we're reinforcing that circuit, right, of not feeling safe, not feeling secure because you don't have that money yet. So conditions is one thing. Another thing is that you've placed some kind of urgency or emotional buy into it. You've basically made it be all one thing, right? So you see having this money as solving all or the majority of your problems, and that it's all a positive thing, which means that you really want it, and you want it bad. You want it so bad. And whenever we want something really, really bad in our brain, it doesn't elicit the parasympathetic response, right? Which is our rest, digest, feed, breathe. It elicits our stress response, because if we really want something and need it, there's something inherently threatening about that, because what if we don't get it? And a big thing about what if we don't get something, right? These thoughts we have, I want this money, is that we're likely making it mean something about ourselves, right? So let's say a part of the reason why you want this money is because you want to feel like you're valuable, right? Like either whether it's the work you do or just how you present yourself in the world, right? Like if you are somebody that wants that fancy car or that Prada bag, Gucci flip flops. Some of you might know where that's from. Um, then it's threatening to maybe not get that, because then it means, according to you, that you're not valuable, which is, of course, not true. And that's a whole subject on its own. But you can see how these thoughts lead to these emotions, and the emotions are so big that it's eliciting a stress response in your brain. And then your brain is not operating in a place that'll help you come up with that next idea, that'll allow you to be well rested so that you can show up with all your energy, that will allow you to pay attention to things that are actually uplifting and motivating and exciting, because it's too busy focusing on this and having this thought, this circuit replay all the time. The reality is that nothing in this world is all good or all bad. Nothing. You can fight me on this if you want to, but I encourage you to take a pause and think about how everything in this world has a mix of both. Might not always be the most balanced mix, but truly they have a mix of both. And that things, events, circumstances, once you make them mean something about you, it's game over. And that you have inherent value and gifts and special things that are unique to you because of your genetic makeup, because of your experience, because of all the intangible things that we can't point or measure that make you you. And so when you have these thoughts that make something mean something about you, it's definitely a dangerous zone. So when we take the example of neutralizing wanting more money, let's say, let's neutralize $1 million. I think, and I replete and I think, I'm like, oh, well, if I had $1 million, all my problems would be solved and it would be the best thing ever. And because I don't have $1 million right now, my life is garbage. I'm not successful. I can't feel safe. And now we look at the positive or neutral side. So we look at the ways in which not having $1 million right now is a good thing. We look at ways that how having $1 million doesn't actually mean anything about us and how it may not actually change all the things we think that it'll change. And we also look at the ways that we can see the lessons around not having $1 million right now that are actually a benefit to us in the long term. So the first one, having $1 million, you know, what is the pro of not having $1 million right now? The pro is that if I were to have $1 million right now, I would probably be very complacent in wanting to finish my PhD, wanting to expand the work I'm doing, coming out with creative ideas on how to help people, building my business, all of that. I wouldn't have, I'm human, right? I wouldn't have as much motivation to put energy into that because I got money. And what a disservice that would be to myself. Imagine how unfulfilled I would be if I didn't put myself out there to do this work and just like lay down on a yacht every day, spending money, not helping people. So that's one. That's a positive of not having $1 million. What is something neutral? Well, I am able to, on my PhD stipend and the yoga gigs and the workshops I give and the people I work with, I am able to fulfill all of my basic needs. I'm able to feed myself, I'm able to clothe myself, pay my rent, pay my bills. I just got back from the vet. Alto's taken care of too. She's sleeping off to the side. Vet visits are not the most fun. It's kind of like our equivalent to the dentist, honestly, maybe even worse. So, really, in terms of basic needs, whether I'm making the money I'm making right now or $1 million, not a whole lot's changed. So, that's kind of like a neutral justification why $1 million really wouldn't solve all my problems. And then, in terms of a lesson of why it's perfect that I don't have $1 million right now, is that I have the opportunity to look at how I have value and impact right now without $1 million. That is an incredibly important lesson and something that I'm going to want to feel. And this is a key thing, something I'm going to want to feel when I'm reaching the people I want to reach, when I'm building the wealth that I want to build for myself, my family, my community. I will want to feel valuable, like what I have to say is valuable, like what I'm saying is really landing with people, and that the work that has changed me and the things that I discovered are changing other people's lives and what they discovered. And the truth is that you can have $1 million and not feel valuable. And if on the way to your $1 million you don't feel valuable, you're not going to feel valuable when you have that $1 million. And so, right there, those are three ways on how not having $1 million right now is a good thing. And when you do this kind of exercise, so taking that thought, I encourage you to do one a day for a week and see how that changes, picking your most annoying thought of the day and writing down all the ways in which it's a good thing. And it's an exercise that won't feel great doing. You probably will feel some relief. I always feel a little bit of relief. I find it takes the edge off emotionally. And if the thought comes up again, I either continue to add to that list if it's the same thought, or I just look at the list to remind myself what are the reasons. And I find that the biggest thing that it helps me with is that I'm just overall calmer. I am not as stressed out, and those thoughts don't get triggered the same way. I honestly don't think them anymore. Actually, what I think is some of those positive things on that list, right? If I get into a situation where I'm like, oh, well, more money would be better right now, I'd be like, well, my basic needs are met, so I'm good. Or I'm like, well, it's great that I'm motivated to continue to build on my business. I've been doing this for maybe no, not even. I've been doing this particular exercise and I've been refining it for 6 months and doing it on various different things. And I have a win to share with you to show that it actually works, which is really cool. So, if you're in academia, you'll know a bit about this process. But when you're submitting a paper to a journal, so I'm doing my PhD in neuroscience, and last year around this time, I submitted my work, my PhD work, to a journal so that it could be published. And when you go through the peer review process, you have like a handful of scientists read your paper and give you comments, and usually it's additional experiments. So we got these comments in October of last year, and we took till about December to address it, and it was a lot of work. Like, I did a lot more experiments, added a lot more ends, redid the figures, wrote up the paper a bit better, and sent it back. And in January, we got the all okay for, the reviewers is what we call them, those scientists that review the paper. The reviewers were happy. They're like, cool, like, we'll hand it off to the editor of the journal, take it from there. And usually what the editor does is they'll go through kind of small, like, administrative things, right? And that process will take maybe a couple weeks, maybe a couple months. And in our case, it took 9 months, maybe even 10. Oh, yeah, 10 math, 10 months to complete. And it was a lot of back and forth with the paper, a lot of them asking for really particularly random things that you never heard of, getting a mistake saying that we plagiarized a part of the paper, but then we couldn't find it and they didn't get back to us for months. And they said, oh, our bad. It's actually fine. And it was really hard to get a hold of anybody at this paper. We couldn't actually talk to the editor directly. And, I'm getting frustrated and I'm getting worried that this paper is not going to get published and that it's going to be rejected at the very end of the line, which is rare, but it does happen. And my supervisor is also getting frustrated and he feels bad for me. And I'm in the process of wrapping up my PhD, right? So having a paper published is, in some programs, not my program, thankfully, is a requirement to actually graduate. So we're getting into like dangerous territory, stressful territory, and in territory where last month we were thinking about sending it to another journal and starting the whole process over, which could very well take a year or more. Needless to say, leading up to this moment, I was stressed and feeling some type of way about my PhD, some type of way about the paper, and honestly, some type of way about myself. I didn't realize I was making this paper mean something about me, mean something about my work, mean something about my PhD, mean something about, making this time that I dedicated towards my education worth it. And this was playing a pretty tough toll on my body, especially for the last couple months. I noticed that my sleep was getting worse. and that just all things PhD related, I was getting in a bit of a bad mood about and just not as motivated and not coming to it with that same energy that I was a few months prior. And it was honestly really bumming me out. And so what I did was I neutralized the thought. I did this a month ago. I neutralized a few thoughts around this. I neutralized the thought around why it would be perfect to pull the paper and send it somewhere else right now. What are the positives in doing that? I also looked at what would the positives be if this paper were never to see the light of day. If my PhD work were to never, ever, ever be published, why would that be a good thing? And then I took it one step deeper, which is honestly pretty nutty. I looked at all the reasons why not even having a PhD would be the best thing ever. Basically, why spending 4, 5 years doing this work, doing my PhD, finishing without having a degree, why that would be a positive thing for me. And let me tell you, it was a really uncomfortable exercise that I didn't really enjoy doing, but I did gain a lot of relief from it. And so as we were going through stuff with the paper, like honestly, I did this exercise and then a few days later I had a meeting with my supervisor and he's like, "Okay, well, we've given it our best shot. We've tried to reach out to the journal. We're not hearing from anyone." He's like, "I think I'm going to email them saying we want to withdraw." And so he did. A month ago, he emailed to the paper that he wanted a withdrawal. A week before that, he sent an email to a senior editor. Now, we've been looking everywhere to be able to contact somebody from an upper level because we just, right, we're kind of trying everything we could under the sun to be able to figure out what was happening with this paper, if it was stuck anywhere, if there was anything that we were missing. And so we send this email on a Friday. It's our Friday meeting. Withdraw the paper, please. Saturday, we get an email from the senior editor saying, "Hey, so sorry to hear this. I just looked in for you, like where this paper is at. It's at this stage. But I see that you request a withdrawal. Would you like me to continue with that process?" And so my supervisor and I were sending each other messages on the weekend, and we agree, you know what, let's go ahead for now. Let's see if this actually makes a difference. And so Monday, we get an email from the paper asking for a few additional changes. And these are the last changes before a paper gets published. It's your typical, like, crossing all the T's, dotting all the I's changes. So we send it within like a day or two. And then 2 weeks pass by, we don't hear anything. But I stay connected to, you know what, it's the best thing if this doesn't get published here ever. If I don't get my PhD, it's all good. And I'm still feeling that way, genuinely, that there's both positive and negatives to it. And 2 weeks go by, we don't hear anything. My supervisor emails the senior editor just saying, like, "Hey, like, is everything okay? Has it stalled?" I honestly forget about it. And they send us a message yesterday, the senior editor, which I didn't look at my email, saying, "We're actually in the process of finalizing it. You'll get an official email tomorrow." And that's what I got this morning. And honestly, I got the email like 2 hours later because I decided to, do my meditations, do my journaling, have a nice coffee, and show up to my inbox relaxed. And that was the first email I saw was, "Congratulations, the paper has been accepted. Here are the proofs. Fill in these forms. It's going to be published." And I screamed, danced around my apartment for 15 minutes, scared poor Alto before going to the vet. I send an email to everybody who's on the author list, congratulating them. And I feel so, and I do, that like it's still today, like I feel great. And honestly, all I can think about right now is getting those forms done. And they haven't sent them to us yet. So no rush. But that, how am I going to celebrate this? Because I want to celebrate this. And what's cool is that I can actually compare this experience to the paper I published in my master's, where the actual publishing process wasn't as weird. It was more of your standard. You get reviews, you get more reviews, and then it gets published. But what I really want to celebrate is the fact that I neutralized this. And the fact that I neutralized this honestly created space for it actually to be a possibility because I didn't want it so much. And I don't believe that's a coincidence. But even if you're not really on board with that that thought, that train of thought, speaking of thoughts, my master's paper I did not celebrate, and I didn't even want to celebrate. Like once I found out that it was published, I was like sick and I felt some relief. It felt like a weight had been taken off my shoulders temporarily. And then I was on to the next thing, like so incredibly quickly. And I honestly didn't feel any kind of pride about putting that work out there together, which is sad. And I know I'm not alone in feeling this. I think for a lot of us, it's hard for us to celebrate those things that we put on a pedestal, which makes it even worse. And so I really want to celebrate this because I think I haven't made it mean anything about me, which makes me want to celebrate it more. Because it's not so much that I'm looking at this and seeing like, that means I'm smart and successful, because it doesn't. But what it shows me is that prioritizing myself, my thoughts, my health, I can look at the whole accomplishment more objectively as looking at the amount of work I've done, the amount of patience that I've had, the amount of determination, tenacity, and doing the uncomfortable thing of neutralizing it at that point at the end. That's what I want to celebrate. And this is what I want to give to you guys so that those thoughts that are really persistent, once you shift them, you are creating literally more brain space for those things that you desire to happen. And when they do happen, to actually be able to feel like a really great sense of joy and pride and accomplishment, as you, and I have quotations here, as you should. Should's not my favorite word, but it is our right to be able to have some healthy pride. And when we achieve things to make them mean something about us, we actually rob ourselves of feeling that healthy pride because those accomplishments weren't coming from a healthy place. They were coming from a place of wanting to be recognized and validated. And that for our brain doesn't allow us to feel the feelings we think those things are going to give us, which is that sense of pride and joy. You found this episode really helpful, please send it to a friend that you know is an overthinker or struggles with thought spirals or stress spirals. And please keep me posted how this process goes for you. Sometimes it can be a bit tricky to actually start because we're so in the negatives or so deep in our sympathetic response or stress response that we can't see in any way, shape, or form how what we're thinking of is positive or neutral. And in that case, if you feel comfortable, you can leave a comment and I'll respond to it directly. Or if you prefer for it to be more private, you can send me a DM on Instagram, synaptic.sylvie, and I'm happy to respond to you there and help you get started. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. I'm really proud of you for making it this far. You are elite, you are a rock star, and I'm wishing you a wonderful rest of your day.